This shocking new study that just came out flew completely under the radar, but it changes everything you thought you knew about Israel and Palestine. It proves that the early Zionists who arrived in 1881 were right when they said the land was nearly empty, but it goes even further. It shows that in 1881, on the eve of the first Zionist immigration wave, Jews actually outnumbered the native Muslim population within the borders of what later became Israel. Yeah, before Herzl, before Zionism, before the state, there were already more Jews than native Muslims living in the land itself. I know, it sounds crazy. So here's what I'm going to do. I'll show you how the researcher got these numbers step by step, then I'll upload the full study to ChatGPT, Gemini, and Grok so the AIs can fact-check it. And at the end, I'll show you where you can download the PDF yourself, totally free, and check every source line by line. The study only looked at the land that became modern Israel, not Gaza, not the West Bank. Those were part of Egypt and Jordan until 1967. And when it says native Muslims, it means families who'd been in the land since before 1830, before massive migration waves started under Egyptian and Ottoman rule. Waves that actually grew in parallel with early Zionist farming and land development. So how did the researcher figure it out? First, they started with the official 1922 British Mandate census, which counted about 277,000 Muslims inside what's now Israel, not including Gaza or the West Bank. Then they dug into Ottoman population records, traveler accounts, and historical studies that document a flood of newcomers during the 1800s. Egyptians brought in by Muhammad Ali, Algerians escaping the French, Horanis from Syria looking for farmland, Circassians and Balkan refugees resettled after wars, plus Maghrebis and Metawalis from Lebanon and North Africa. When all those migration streams are added up, it turns out that roughly 250,000 Muslims in 1922 were from migrant families, and only a small slice, somewhere between 11,000 and 54,000, could actually trace their roots in the land back before 1830. Now here's where it gets wild. If you take that small native group and roll the numbers backward from 1922 to 1881 using a really conservative 1% yearly growth, you end up with about 8,000 to 36,000 native Muslims back then, with a middle estimate around 22,000. And guess what? The Jewish old Yishuv, the Jews who'd already been in the land for centuries, numbered around 25,000 to 30,000. In other words, on the eve of the first Zionist immigration wave, there were already more Jews than native Muslims living in the land that became Israel. Don't take my word for it. I'm uploading this study to ChatGPT, Gemini, and Grok to see if any of them can find a mistake in the data or the math. First up, Gemini. I asked it straight up, given how the study defines native, is the conclusion accurate? And Gemini actually said yes. It called the conclusion accurate under that definition. Then it broke it down in simple terms. About 277,000 Muslims in 1922 within Israel's 67 borders, but most descended from later migrants. Egyptians, Syrians, Algerians, Circassians, and others who came after 1830. That leaves only around 12 to 54,000 truly native Muslims. Roll that back to 1881 at 1% growth, and you're talking roughly 8 to 36,000 natives, compared to 24 to 30,000 Jews in the old Yishuv. So yeah, even Gemini confirmed it checks out. Next up, ChatGPT. I asked it the same thing I asked Gemini. Given the study's definition of native Muslims, is the conclusion accurate? But despite that wording, it still pushed back on the definition itself. It argued the cutoff was too narrow, that native should include anyone whose family had lived in the land for decades, even if they originally migrated later in the 1800s. I disagree with that idea, because if we keep moving the goalposts like that, the term native becomes meaningless. Every migration wave eventually becomes native if you wait long enough, which makes the whole concept a moving target. So I asked again, clearly this time. Assuming the study's definition is valid and accepted, is the conclusion accurate? And that changed everything. ChatGPT responded, yes, the math checks out. It restated the data. About 277,000 Muslims in 1922, most from later migrations, leaving roughly 12 to 54,000 truly native, or 8 to 36,000 in 1881. Compared to 24 to 30,000 Jews in the old Yishuv, the study's conclusion holds. ChatGPT's final verdict. If we accept the definition, the conclusion is internally accurate and logically supported by its data and method. So after clarifying the question, even ChatGPT confirmed it adds up. Finally, Grok. I asked it the same question. Given the study's definition, is the conclusion accurate? Grok said yes. The math holds up exactly as written. It repeated the numbers almost word for word. About 277,000 Muslims in 1922, most from later migrations, leaving 12 to 54,000 truly native, or 8 to 36,000 in 1881, compared to 24 to 30,000 Jews in the old Yishuv. Then came the twist. Grok said the definition of native was too restrictive, calling the result technically correct but misleading. But here's the catch. The same kind of migration gets totally different labels depending on who we're talking about. Some people call one group natives, another settlers, another migrants, and another colonizers, even if they arrived at the same time. That's why the study draws a clear line. One rule for everyone, same timeline, same standard. So in the end, Grok agreed. The math checks out. It's just the framing that people argue over. So after running this through Gemini, ChatGPT, and Grok, here's the bottom line. None of them found an error in the math. They all confirmed the numbers make sense. The only disagreement was over how native should be defined. And that's the key takeaway. Change the definition, and you change the entire story. But within the study's own framework, every AI agreed, the logic holds. The full paper is available for free. Just go to the PalestinianLiebook.com and see for yourself. Download it, read it, and see if you can find a flaw.